and then return to the mill, and then eventually worked alongside their own children, I suppose.
These Lancashire women weavers were amongst the highest paid women in industry, earning almost as much as the men they worked alongside. But the majority of women were only earning about 40% of the unskilled men's wages, which is about £82 a week in today's money. The struggle to be a good wife, combining work, housework and motherhood, was exhausting and debilitating. It aged you. The women in these films who look like they're in their 70s are actually probably close to 50. Women could not afford to take time off during pregnancy, so they worked until the last possible moment, often giving birth at work. The children were looked after by grandmothers and neighbours, and, as you can see here, by older sisters, until they were old enough to go to work themselves. Many of them grew up with illnesses like rickets, as you can see by the way the man on the right-hand edge of the picture is walking. Poor diets and lack of hygiene led to eye disease. We think of mining as an all-male preserve, but women worked at the surface in some parts of Lancashire. These women, known as pit brow lassies, worked at the pit head, grading coal and pushing the loaded wagons between the buildings. Known for their independence and physical strength, they're also famous for their working clothes, thought to be highly unusual at the time. These lassies are wearing jackets and skirts over leggings. In other coal seams, they wore breeches or short trousers, thought to be very risque. The pit brow lassies were criticised for their lack of femininity, so much so that legislation was being proposed in Parliament to outlaw their job. There was outcry amongst the lassies. They travelled to London in their trousers to prove that their work gear was perfectly decent, and they won their case. Women continued to work the coalfields up until the early 1960s. These fisherwomen also had a reputation for independence. They're cleaning fish at North Shields, Tyneside. They had an unusual life. They travelled with the North Sea fishing fleet, moving from port to port, getting the fish ready for market after the catch was landed. With all these married women working, there was little time to cook for the family. There was a gap in the market for takeaway food.
There's some dispute about who invented fish and chips. Some say the wonderful event took place in East London, others in Lancashire. Certainly, mushy peas are very much a northern thing. Fast food like fish and chips and meat pies took off in a big way in the northwest to feed the rapidly growing industrial population.
The films of Mitchell and Kenyon give us a new and surprisingly fresh view of the Edwardian city. Many of the people in these films appear to be very well turned out. It was a time of new prosperity. The price of goods had fallen and more people could afford the new brands like Nestle's milk, Singer sewing machines and Cadbury's chocolate. Mitchell and Kenyon were busy cashing in on this gilded age. Their local films were very popular, but they also started making so-called dramas under the rather obscure brand of Northern Films. Their dramas were like their factory gate films. Only one shot, but with lots of confusing action. Here's a brief glimpse of one of their untitled productions. Surprisingly, the dramas took a while to catch on. The majority of Mitchell and Kenyon's films that were found were non-fiction. What the paying public really wanted was their local films. For all these men and women in crowded cities like Wigan, life was looking up. They earned more than their parents had done and often living in better conditions. But compared to today, the divide between rich and poor was huge. The Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, had a personal fortune of £6 million. That's £374 million in today's money. While this teenager would have been earning 6 shillings for a 68-hour week. There are few old people in these films. People died young. Women lived till 50 on average, men till only 46. Only 1% of the population was over 65. It's now nearly 20 times that. And working conditions, though improving, were still awful. There were horrendous industrial accidents as well as work-related diseases. These loom minders had a very high percentage of prostate cancer, caused by the oil which splashed onto their overalls. These industrial workers migrated from the country to the urban centres. The towns and cities that Mitchell and Kenyon were filming had mushroomed. But people either lived in the city or the countryside. Much of the suburban sprawl that we're so familiar with hadn't been built yet. This film, shot from the top of a tram in the outskirts of Blackpool, shows you could travel from the open countryside to the city centre within minutes. Mitchell and Kenyon filmed cities all over, from Blackpool to this Belfast tram. They found inventive ways to film metropolitan life. Motorcars were still a great rarity. They were out of reach for most of the population. In 1900, there were lots of traffic jams. It was just the modes of transport that were different. With no traffic lights, it was the policeman who had to keep the pedestrians safe and guide the traffic on this Manchester High Street. It was a time of new technologies. Horse-drawn trams were on the way out, and electrified trams were the latest thing. In this film of Bradford, new tram tracks are being added to the network. The open top-deck fare was half that of travelling in the downstairs saloon. And for women, negotiating getting on board in a long skirt needed a particular skill. Travel was being democratised. Getting around the city was easier than ever before. The latest design, the safety bicycle, with 2 wheels the same